The observation deck smelled like recycled air and failure. Kenna pressed her forehead against the reinforced glass, watching another transport vessel limp toward the refugee station. Its hull bore scorch marks from atmospheric entry, patches of emergency sealant covering what had probably been catastrophic damage. She'd seen 17 ships like it this week alone. Behind her, the medical bay hummed with activity. Voices called out in languages she didn't recognize, some human, most not. The Galactic Coalition had established this way station 6 months ago, right after the Vrexian Empire collapsed, and sent billions fleeing across 3 sectors. Kenna had volunteered immediately, despite her mother's protest that a xenobiologist had no business playing nurse. Her mother had been wrong about that. Dead wrong. The transport docked with a metallic groan that echoed through the station's bones. Kenna grabbed her scanner and headed for the airlock, joining the triage team already assembling there. Dr. Vosh, a Centaurian with 4 arms and infinite patience, nodded at her approach. Preliminary scans show mostly Vrexian refugees, Vosh said, his translator rendering his chittering into flat English. But there's something else. Life signs we can't identify. Kenna frowned. Unknown species. Unknown category. The readings are all wrong. Too dense. Too hot. The airlock cycled open. The smell hit first. Fear, unwashed bodies, and something sharp that made Kenna's nose burn. Refugees shuffled out in groups of 3 and 4, clinging to whatever possessions they'd managed to save. Most wore environmental suits, patched with whatever materials they could find. One family had used what looked like cooking foil. Kenna moved through them with practiced efficiency, scanning for injuries, checking oxygen levels, flagging anyone who needed immediate care. A young Vrexian clutched a container to his chest, eyes wild with panic, until she gestured for him to keep it, probably containing something precious, or what remained of someone precious. Kenna. Vosh's voice cut through the noise. Back of the ship. Now. She pushed her way through the crowd. The transport's cargo bay had been converted into additional passenger space, crude benches welded to the walls. Most refugees had already disembarked, but one figure remained hunched in the far corner. The figure was massive. Even sitting, it stood taller than Kenna. Its breathing sounded wrong, wet and labored. As she approached, her scanner went haywire, numbers spinning into ranges she'd never seen. Hello. Kenna kept her voice soft. Can you understand me? The figure shifted. Light from the corridor caught scales. Deep crimson scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A long snout turned toward her, revealing eyes that glowed with internal heat. A dragon. An actual dragon. Kenna had seen the reports. Everyone had. 3 months ago, humanity had made first contact with a species from the scorched reaches, a region of space so hostile that nothing could survive there. Nothing except creatures evolved in temperatures that would melt most starship hulls. The dragons had no technology, no interest in galactic politics. They simply existed in their impossible home, occasionally trading with species brave enough to approach their borders. This dragon had no business being here. On a refugee transport, wrapped in what looked like emergency cooling blankets that were clearly failing. You're overheating, Kenna said. She didn't need her scanner to tell her that. Waves of heat rolled off the creature, making the air shimmer. You can't survive here. The station's ambient temperature is designed for carbon-based life that evolved on temper worlds. The dragon's eyes focused on her. Intelligence burned there, along with pain. Small ones, the dragon said. Its voice sounded like grinding stone, the translator struggling with the fundamental tones. Came with small ones. Promise stay with small ones. Kenna glanced at the refugees still filtering out. Which small ones? The dragon tried to rise and collapsed immediately. One wing caught the wall, scales scraping against metal. Family. Vrexian family. Children afraid. I promised. Understanding hit Kenna like a physical blow. This creature had voluntarily left its home, had boarded a transport designed for species that lived at a fraction of its natural temperature, had endured what must be agonizing cold, all to protect a family of refugees. Dr. Vosh, Kenna's training kicked in. I need a thermal containment unit. the industrial ones from engineering. And someone find me the Vrection family with children who came off this transport. She turned back to the dragon. I'm Kenna. I'm going to help you. But first, tell me your name. The dragon's eyes dimmed slightly. Syrax. My name is Syrax. All right, Syrax. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to get you somewhere warm. Somewhere you can survive. And then we're going to bring the family to you. The children can visit you safely. Does that work? You help? Even though I'm not your kind. Kenna placed her hand on the dragon's scales, ignoring the heat that made her palm burn. Especially because you're not my kind. That's what humans do best. Engineering Bay 7 had never been designed as living quarters. The massive thermal processors that regulated the station's cooling systems took up most of the space, generating enough waste heat to run a small city. Perfect for a dragon dying from cold. Kenna watched through the observation window as Syrax uncurled for the first time in what must have been days. The dragon's wings spread wide, scales shimmering as they absorbed the blessed heat. Around the bay, temperature gauges screamed warnings that she'd instructed the station AI to ignore. This is insane. Station Commander Price stood beside her, arms crossed. That creature is generating enough heat to compromise hull integrity in that section. Then we'll reinforce the hull, Kenna said without looking away from Syrax. We've done harder things. We're a refugee way station, not a zoo for exotic species. Our resources are stretched thin as it is. That exotic species protected a family through a week-long journey that should have killed it. The Vrection father told me Syrax stood guard outside their shelter every night when their settlement was under attack. When evacuation came, the children wouldn't leave without their protector. Price's expression softened slightly. I read the report. Still doesn't change our situation. Food, water, medical supplies all running low. Now we have to figure out how to feed something that probably eats molten rock. Actually, Kenna pulled up her research notes. Dragons are silicon-based life forms. They metabolize minerals directly. There's an asteroid field 3 light hours from here, mostly iron and nickel. We could harvest what Syrax needs. You've been doing homework. Someone has to. Kenna finally turned to face the commander. Sir, I know this complicates everything, but that dragon embodies what we're supposed to be doing here. Taking in those who have nowhere else to go. Protecting the vulnerable. If we turn Syrax away, what does that say about us? Price studied the dragon through the window. Syrax had curled around a heat exchanger, the first piece visible in the creature's posture since boarding the transport. Fine. But you're in charge of this situation. Anything goes wrong, it's on you. Understood. The door to the bay cycled open. 3 Vrection children rushed through, their translator units struggling to keep up with their excited chatter. Their parents followed more cautiously, uncertainty clear in their crystalline features. Syrax, the smallest child barely knee-high to Kenna, ran straight for the dragon. Kenna's heart stopped. She'd calculated the safe distance, had protocols in place, but the child moved too fast. Syrax's head lifted, and then the most extraordinary thing happened. The air around the dragon shimmered differently, temperature readings dropping by 50 degrees in an instant. The dragon had somehow pulled its heat inward, creating a pocket of bearable space. The child crashed into Syrax's foreleg, tiny arms wrapping around scales that could have sliced through steel. You're okay. Papa said you were dying, but you're okay. Little Vex. Syrax's voice rumbled with affection. I'm better now. The human doctor made me warm again. The other 2 children joined their sibling, clambering over Syrax's lower limbs with the fearlessness of the young. Their parents approached more slowly, their father extending a gesture of gratitude toward Kenna. We cannot thank you enough, he said through his translator. Syrax saved our lives many times. When we were told the transport could not accommodate both us and our friend, we almost stayed behind. The captain changed his mind, the mother added, but only after Syrax paid him with 3 scales. They are worth a fortune among collectors. Everything Syrax owned, given for the right to suffer in cold. Kenna watched the dragon gently nudge a child who had climbed too high. The smallest details were what struck her. the way Syrax adjusted body temperature to avoid burning the children, the careful placement of claws that could shred metal, the patience in those ancient eyes. "Tell me about how you met," Kenneth said. The father's expression shifted into what might have been a smile. "Our settlement on Vrex 4 was near the border of the Scorched Reaches. Most species avoided the area, but dragons sometimes crossed into our territory. We learned to coexist. Syrax first appeared during a dust storm that destroyed half our crops. The children were trapped in a collapsed building. I heard crying," Syrax said. "Small voices in the dark. I dug until I found them. The colony council wanted to drive Syrax away," the mother continued. "They feared what they didn't understand. But our family refused. We built Syrax a shelter near our home. We shared what we had. They gave me friendship," Syrax said simply. "I never had that before. Dragons are solitary. We do not understand companionship until we experience it. These little ones taught me what it means to belong." The smallest child had fallen asleep against Syrax's side, tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. The dragon's wing curved overhead like a protective canopy, maintaining that careful bubble of survivable temperature. Kenna pulled out her scanner, checking readings purely out of habit. Everything looked stable, more than stable. The dragon's life signs had strengthened dramatically in just the hour since entering the bay. "How long will Syrax stay here?" the father asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Kenna glanced at the observation window where Commander Price still stood, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. "As long as necessary," Kenna said, making the decision even as she spoke. "This is a way station for refugees. For anyone fleeing disaster, looking for safety. Syrax qualifies." 3 weeks passed in strange rhythm. Kenna fell into a routine she'd never anticipated, checking on a dragon between triage sessions, coordinating asteroid mining operations before morning briefings, explaining to incredulous coalition inspectors why engineering base 7 now registered surface of a sun temperatures. The station adapted. It always did. Refugees who'd initially feared Syrax began bringing their children to visit. The dragon became a fixture, a strange landmark in their temporary home. Word spread through the refugee networks. The way station that sheltered a dragon. The humans who said yes when everyone else said no. Kenna was reviewing supply manifests when her communicator chirped. Vash's face appeared on the small screen, his expression troubled. "Kenna, we have a situation in Base 7. She was moving before he finished speaking. The corridors blurred past as she ran, scenarios spinning through her mind. Had Syrax's temperature spiked? Had the hull finally given way? The observation window showed chaos. Syrax stood fully upright, wings spread in a display that made the dragon look twice its already considerable size. The temperature in the bay had climbed to dangerous levels. 3 station security officers stood at a safe distance, weapons drawn but not aimed. Between them and Syrax huddled the Vrexian family. And another family. And another. At least 20 refugees crowded into the bay, children crying, parents holding whatever possessions they could carry. Kenna hit the door controls. Heat slammed into her like a physical wall. She forced herself forward, pulling up her environmental suit's cooling systems to maximum. "What's happening?" Commander Price materialized beside her. Coalition enforcement ship just docked. They're rounding up Vrexian refugees for deportation. Apparently, the Vrexian homeworld government has stabilized enough to start reclaiming its citizens. Mandatory repatriation. These people fled a war zone. You can't just send them back. I don't make coalition law. The enforcement officers have proper documentation. These families are scheduled for transfer within the hour. Price gestured at the bay. "They ran here. Your dragon won't let my people near them." Syrax's eyes found Kenna through the chaos. "These families are afraid. I cannot let them be taken if they do not wish to go." One of the refugees, an older Vrexian with a face carved by hardship, stepped forward. "The government says we can return. They promise safety, promise reconstruction. But it is the same government that let the colony worlds burn while they protected the core systems. The same leaders who called us acceptable losses. We want asylum," another refugee added. We want to stay in coalition space, find new homes. But they say we must return. They say Vrexians belong on Vrexian worlds. Kenna's mind raced. She'd studied galactic law, had passed the mandatory legal courses for station personnel. Asylum claims required processing, required time. Time these families wouldn't have if enforcement shipped them out in the next hour. Commander, they're requesting formal asylum. That requires a hearing we're not equipped to conduct. And even if we were, enforcement outranks station authority. This isn't a request, Kenna. It's a lawful order. Through the observation window, Kenna saw more enforcement officers gathering. Their armor marked them as Thorian, a species known for rigid adherence to regulation. They carried stun weapons and binding fields. Non-lethal, but effective. Syrax, Kenna spoke directly to the dragon. If you resist, they'll classify you as a hostile. They'll have legal grounds to remove you from the station, possibly imprison you. Then they will do these things. I made a promise. When little Vex was afraid in the dark, I promised to keep him safe. I will not break that promise because someone in authority says I must. The smallest Vrexian child, Vex, clung to his father's leg. His eyes were fixed on Syrax with absolute trust. The kind of trust that expected protection, that believed in safety even when the world was falling apart. Kenna had seen that expression before, on a dozen different species, in 100 different situations. It was the look that made her volunteer for this assignment in the first place. Commander, she said slowly, what if they're not in the bay? Price frowned. What? Enforcement is looking for Vrexian refugees in station custody. But the station's environmental systems are having issues. Multiple sections are undergoing emergency repairs, including the entire lower habitat ring. Understanding dawned in Price's eyes. Those sections are offline, uninhabited, certainly not housing any refugees. Exactly. And if someone happened to accidentally file incorrect location data in the station manifest, well, bureaucratic errors happen, especially during refugee crisis situations. You're talking about hiding 20 people in uninhabited sections while enforcement is on station. That's obstruction of galactic law. I'm talking about processing asylum claims properly, following procedure. If it takes a few days to locate the claimants in our overcrowded station, that's unfortunate but understandable. Price was quiet for a long moment. Beyond the window, enforcement officers were moving into formation. They'd make their move soon, regardless of the dragon standing guard. I could be court-martialed for this, Price said finally. I know. You'll definitely be court-martialed for this. I know. Price pulled up his command interface. His fingers moved across the holographic controls. Looks like there's a system glitch. Manifest data is corrupting. It'll take time to restore. Lots of time. He looked at Kenna. Get them out of here. Use the maintenance tunnels. Bay 7 connects to the old construction corridors, the ones we sealed off when the habitat ring was completed. Kenna moved before he could change his mind. She crossed the bay in quick strides, the heat barely registering now. The refugees watched her approach with desperate hope. Follow me, quickly and quietly. Bring only what you can carry in one hand. Children need to stay silent. The Vrexian father gripped her arm. You risk much for us. You risked everything to reach safety. This is the least I can do. Syrax lowered its wings as Kenna led the families toward a service panel at the bay's rear wall. The dragon's heat had warped the metal slightly, but the mechanism still functioned. The panel opened to reveal a dark tunnel barely tall enough for most adults. This leads to the old construction levels, Kenna explained. There are emergency supplies stashed throughout, enough for a few days. I'll bring more when I can. She met Syrax's eyes. You need to stay. If you disappear, they'll tear the station apart, looking for everyone. But if you're here, visible and accounted for, they'll assume the refugees are somewhere else. I do not like this plan. Neither do I, but it's the only one that works. The enforcement ship departed 6 hours later, taking with them 3 Vrexian families who had chosen repatriation willingly and a formal complaint about station inefficiency. Commander Price had endured a lecture about proper record-keeping and manifest management with stoic professionalism. The Thorian captain had been particularly scathing about human organizational abilities. Kenna waited until the enforcement ship cleared scanner range before accessing the maintenance tunnels. She carried supplies in a heavy pack: food, water, medical equipment, and blankets. The tunnels smelled of dust and old metal, untouched since the station's construction 5 years ago. She found the refugees in an abandoned construction hub, a wide space where 3 tunnel branches met. They'd organized themselves with impressive efficiency. Children slept in groups, adults taking turns keeping watch. Emergency lights cast everything in dim blue. Little Vex spotted her first. "Dr. Kenna, did the bad people leave?" "They left. You're safe now." She knelt to distribute supplies. "But we need to keep you hidden a bit longer." The coalition moves slowly on asylum claims. Could take weeks to process. Weeks in these tunnels. One mother looked around the cramped space. "With children, I know it's not ideal. I'm working on something better. Give me a few days." The Vrexian father who'd spoken before approached. "You have done more than we could ask. We will endure." Kenna finished distributing supplies and made her way back through the tunnels. She was exhausted, running on stimulants and stubbornness. But her shift wasn't over. The main medical bay was packed, as always, dozens of refugees requiring care at a doctor. Vosh met her at the entrance. "You look terrible." "Feeling fantastic." She pulled up the triage board. "What do we have?" "Mostly minor injuries. But there's a Centaurian family in Bay 3. Their daughter has respiratory distress. I need you to check her scans." Kenna spent the next 3 hours moving between patients. A broken arm here, a fever there, the endless parade of needs that never stopped. She was examining a child's rash when her communicator buzzed. "Maintenance emergency in Engineering Base 7, thus she ran. Again, her legs screamed in protest. She ignored them. The bay's observation window showed Syrax curled tightly, wings wrapped around the dragon's body. Temperature readings fluctuated wildly. As Kenna watched, they dropped 50 degrees, then spiked 100 higher. She entered the bay cautiously. "Syrax? What's wrong?" The dragon's head lifted slowly. Those glowing eyes were dimmer than before. "I am struggling. The heat here is artificial. It sustains, but does not nourish. I need natural heat. Need home." Kenna pulled out her medical scanner. The readings confirmed what she feared. Syrax was deteriorating. The artificial environment could keep the dragon alive, but not healthy. Not indefinitely. "How long?" She asked the question, though she didn't want the answer. "I do not know. Weeks, perhaps. Maybe less. My kind are not meant for places like this. We belong in the reaches, in the heart of dying stars and volcanic worlds." Kenna sat on the deck plating, heedless of the heat. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because those families need time. Because little Vex needs to know he is safe. Because some things matter more than survival." That's the most human thing I've ever heard. And I've only ever met humans. Perhaps your kind and mine are not so different. Perhaps we both understand what it means to protect those we love. Kenna's communicator buzzed again. Commander Price requesting her presence immediately. She stood reluctantly. "I'll figure something out. I promise. I know you will try. That is what humans do. You try impossible things, and sometimes you succeed." Price's office overlooked the main docking bay. Through the window, Kenna could see ships coming and going, the endless flow of refugees seeking safety. The commander looked as tired as she felt. "I've been contacted by the Coalition Science Directorate," Price said without preamble. "Word about our dragon got around. They want to send researchers, study Syrax, learn about silicon-based life. They're offering funding, equipment, everything we need to expand the station, in exchange for making Syrax a research subject." They say subject. I say prisoner. They'll build a proper habitat, sure. But Syrax won't be free to leave. We'll be poked and prodded, studied like a specimen. Kenneth thought of those dimming eyes, that weakening voice. "Syrax is dying here. The artificial heat isn't enough." "I know. I've been reviewing your medical reports." Price pulled up a star chart. "There's a small colony at the edge of the scorched reaches. Mixed species settlement. Mostly researchers and traders who do business with the dragons. They have facilities rated for extreme temperatures. If we could get Sirax there, that's 3 weeks travel at minimum. And we need a specialized transport, something that could maintain temperatures high enough for a dragon while still supporting a crew. The Coalition has such transports, used for mining operations in stellar coronas. I could requisition one, claim we're relocating Sirax for study. They'll want documentation, proof that Sirax is going to a proper research facility. Then we'll fake it. Wouldn't be the first time we've bent rules this week. Price met her eyes. But here's the problem. Sirax won't leave while those Vrection families are in hiding. And I can't process their asylum claims fast enough. The system is deliberately slow, designed to discourage claimants. Kenna's exhausted mind spun through possibilities. What if they weren't alone? What if other refugees applied for asylum as a group, all citing the same reasons? You want to start a movement. I want to highlight a systemic problem. The Coalition is deporting people back to worlds that barely have infrastructure, claiming everything's fine when it's not. If enough refugees refuse, if enough stations support them, maybe someone has to pay attention. That's a nice thought. Also completely naive. Probably. But I'm too tired to come up with better ideas. Price was quiet, studying the star chart. You know what the penalty is for orchestrating mass resistance to Coalition directives? Court-martial, prison, being banned from ever working with refugees again. And you're willing to risk that? Kenna thought of Vex's trusting eyes, of Sirax curled around dying heat exchangers, of 20 families huddled in dark tunnels because they refuse to return to a broken homeworld. Yes, then let's start a revolution. The next morning, 17 more families requested asylum. By afternoon, it was 43. By evening, every Vrection refugee on the station had filed formal claims. The Coalition Enforcement Office responded with predictable outrage, demanding explanations, threatening sanctions. Commander Price responded with bureaucratic precision, citing every regulation that supported their right to process claims properly. The back and forth generated enough paperwork to bury a small moon. Meanwhile, Kenna worked on the real problem. She contacted the colony at the edge of the scorched reaches, spoke with their medical director, arranged everything. The facility could handle Sirax, could provide the natural heat the dragon needed. They asked no questions about research programs or Coalition oversight. We help those who need it, the director said simply. That's why we're here. The transport arrived 4 days later. A massive industrial hauler retrofitted for high-temperature cargo. Its crew were salamandrians, species comfortable in environments that would cook most other life forms. They took one look at Sirax and nodded with professional appreciation. First time we've shipped a passenger who can generate their own heat, the captain said. This'll be an easy run. The hard part was telling the Vrection families. Kenna gathered them in the tunnels. 20 families crowded into the dark space. She explained about Sirax's deteriorating condition, about the transport, about the colony that could save the dragon's life. Little Vex started crying immediately. But Sirax promised to keep us safe. If Sirax leaves, who will protect us? His father knelt beside him. Sirax protected us so we could reach safety. But now Sirax needs protection too. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let those we love take care of themselves. I don't want Sirax to go. Neither do I, little one. But that's why we must let go. The families gathered in Engineering Bay 7 for a final goodbye. They brought gifts, small tokens saved from destroyed homes. A child's drawing, a piece of jewelry, a data chip containing family photos. Sirax accepted each with solemn grace. I will carry these to the reaches, the dragon said. Will tell my kind about the small ones who taught me friendship, who taught me that family is not determined by species or temperature or where you were born. Vex climbed up Sirax's foreleg one last time, small arms wrapping around the dragon's neck. You have to come back. When we get our new home, wherever that is, you have to visit. I promise. When you are settled, when you are safe, I will find you. Dragons live long lives. I have time to keep all my promises. The transfer took hours. Sirax had to be carefully moved from the bay to the transport's cargo hold, systems monitoring temperature every step of the way. The Salamandrian crew worked with impressive efficiency, treating the dragon with respect rather than fear. Kenna watched from the observation deck as the transport undocked. She'd given the captain coordinates for the colony, contact information for the medical director, and her personal guarantee that any expenses would be covered by her own accounts if necessary. "Think we'll see it again?" Vosh stood beside her, his multiple arms crossed in contemplation. "I don't know, but Syrax will live. That matters. What matters is that you helped. Both the dragon and the families. Even when it meant breaking rules, risking everything. Someone had to. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have followed orders, avoided complications. That's what makes you dangerous." Kenna smiled slightly. "I'll take that as a compliment." The transport jumped to faster-than-light travel, its signature fading from scanners. Gone, but alive. That would have to be enough. Commander Price found her an hour later. He held a data pad with official-looking seals and entirely too much red text. "Coalition has rejected all asylum claims. They're sending another enforcement ship, this one with twice the personnel and authorization to use force if necessary. When? 3 days. Maybe 4 if we're lucky." Kenna's exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. They bought time, kept families safe, saved Syrax. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. "I'm out of ideas," she admitted. "I don't know how to fix this." "Maybe you don't have to." Price showed her the data pad. "While you've been organizing refugee resistance, word spread. Other stations started reporting similar situations. Other commanders making similar choices. There are 17 way stations now openly processing asylum claims against coalition directives. 17 stations isn't enough to change policy. No, but it's enough to get attention. The Coalition Council has called an emergency session. They're reviewing refugee repatriation protocols. They'll rubber stamp the existing policy. Probably. But there's media coverage now. Pressure from member species whose stations are involved. It's not a revolution yet, but it's a start." Kenna leaned against the window, watching ships dock and depart. Behind her, medical bay alarms chimed their constant reminder of work left undone. Somewhere in the tunnels, families waited in darkness, hoping for salvation that might never come. "Tell me honestly," she said, "do you think we'll win this?" Price was quiet for a long moment. "I think we'll keep fighting. That's all anyone can do." 3 days later, the enforcement ship arrived. But so did something else. A coalition diplomatic vessel running priority clearance codes. Its captain requested immediate conference with all station command staff. The meeting took place in the station's conference room. The diplomat was human, which somehow made everything more surreal. She introduced herself as Ambassador Chun, Coalition Refugee Affairs. "I'll be direct," Chun said. "The council meeting was yesterday. The refugee repatriation policy stands. However, there are now provisions for individual asylum review in cases where claimants can demonstrate credible fear of persecution or inability to safely return. That's the same policy we already had," Kenneth said. "Nothing changed. The implementation changed. Review boards will now include station commanders and medical staff. Local authorities will have say in determinations. It's not perfect, but it's better than before." Commander Price leaned forward. "And the families currently in our custody will receive full reviews, which, given the circumstances and time involved, will likely result in approved asylum claims. Congratulations, Commander. You've set precedent." The enforcement officers departed the next day, leaving behind documentation for the review process. It would take weeks to properly process all the claims, but the families could leave the tunnels, return to proper housing. They could stop hiding. Kenna found Vex in the habitat ring, playing with other refugee children. He saw her approach and ran over, translator unit bouncing on his small chest. "Dr. Kenna, did you hear? Papa says we get to stay. We're going to live in the coalition now. I heard. I'm happy for you and your family. Will Syrax know? Can we tell Syrax we're safe now?" Kenna pulled up her communicator. She'd received a message that morning from the colony at the Reaches. Syrax had arrived safely, was already showing improvement. The dragon had asked about the families, about Vex specifically. "How about we send Syrax a message? You can tell your friend yourself." Vex's whole face lit up with joy. 6 months passed in a blur of routine and change. The station expanded, adding 2 new habitat rings to accommodate the refugee population. The coalition implemented new asylum protocols across all way stations, grudgingly acknowledging that local authorities might have better understanding of individual situations. Kenna's court-martial never materialized. Officially, her actions had been within acceptable parameters of station medical authority. Unofficially, prosecuting her would have required admitting the coalition's own policies were flawed. So they let it go, buried under mountains of bureaucratic revision and policy updates. The Vrection families integrated into station life. Some found work in maintenance, others in food service, a few in medical. Vex's father became assistant to the station's chief engineer. His mother started teaching language courses, helping new refugees learn coalition standard. The families they'd helped had become part of the station's fabric. On a quiet evening, Kenna stood in the observation deck watching ships arrive and depart. The flow never stopped. Always more refugees, always more people fleeing disaster, seeking safety. But now the station could help more of them, could say yes instead of no. Her communicator chimed. Incoming vessel, direct from the scorched reaches. Not a cargo hauler this time. Something smaller, faster. Something not quite like anything in the standard registries. The ship docked at an auxiliary port, one designed for non-standard vessels. Kenna met it personally, bringing Vex and his family. The boy had been bouncing with excitement all day after she'd told him who was coming. The airlock cycled. Heat washed through the corridor, making environmental alerts scream. And then Sirax emerged, scales gleaming with health, eyes bright with vitality. The dragon looked magnificent, powerful, every inch a creature born of stellar heat and volcanic fury. Little Vex. Sirax's voice rumbled with pleasure. You have grown. Vex ran forward, no longer the terrified child from 6 months ago. He'd found safety, found home. His fear had transformed into confidence. But his love for his protector remained unchanged. You came back. You really came back. I made a promise. Dragons do not break promises to friends. The reunion was everything Kenna had hoped. Sirax met every family that had hidden in the tunnels, remembered each by name. The dragon brought gifts from the reaches, crystalline structures grown in impossible heat, mineral formations that glowed with internal light, treasures from a world humans could never visit. That evening, Kenna and Sirax stood together in Engineering Base 7. The bay had been converted to proper quarters now, a space where Sirax could visit without straining station systems. Temperature controls maintained the heat the dragon needed, but not so much that others couldn't approach safely. You seem different, Kenna observed. Not just healthier. Something else. I have purpose now. The colony at the Reaches does more than study dragons. They facilitate communication between my kind and the wider galaxy. Dragons are solitary by nature, but we can learn. We can change. Some of us want to. Want to what? Understand the small ones better. Help them when we can. I am not the only dragon who has experienced friendship with other species. There are others like me, others who found something in the galaxy beyond our volcanic homes. Kenna smiled. You're building bridges, literally and figuratively. I learned from humans. From you specifically. You saw a dying creature in a cargo bay and decided to help, even when it complicated everything. That kind of compassion changes those who experience it. I just did what needed doing. No, you did what few others would do. You risked your career, your future, for people you barely knew. For a dragon you'd never met. That is not common. That is exceptional. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the bay's window. Ships moved against the darkness, coming and going, carrying refugees to safety, supplies to those in need. The station hummed with life, with hope. The council is still debating refugee policy, Kenna said eventually. There are factions that want to reverse the new protocols, return to mandatory repatriation. They argue the coalition can't handle the refugee crisis as it stands. And what do you think? I think the universe is always going to have disasters. Wars, famines, planetary failures. There will always be people fleeing, always be those seeking safety. The question isn't whether we can handle it. The question is whether we're willing to try. then you will continue trying, and others will join you. That is how change happens. One person deciding to help, then another, until suddenly there are thousands, millions, all choosing compassion over convenience. Vex appeared in the doorway, accompanied by a dozen other children. Mixed species, all refugees who'd found home on the station. They carried drawings, small crafts, gifts made by young hands. "We made these for you," Vex explained, "so you remember us when you go back to the reaches." Syrax accepted each gift with care, examining every drawing and craft as though it were priceless treasure. "I will display these in my home. We'll tell other dragons about the small ones who taught me what family means." The children stayed for hours, playing in Syrax's presence, their laughter echoing through the bay. They climbed on the dragon's limbs, asked endless questions about the reaches, begged for stories about volcanic worlds and stellar coronas. Eventually, parents arrived to collect tired children. Vex was last to leave, reluctant to let go of his friend. "You'll come back again, right? Promise." "I promise. And perhaps someday, when you are older, you can visit my home. The colony has facilities where small ones can survive the heat. You could see the reaches yourself." "Really? Really?" After the families departed, Kenna walked Syrax back to the auxiliary port. The dragon's ship waited, ready for the journey back to impossible heat and volcanic glory. "Thank you," Kenna said simply, "for keeping your promise, for showing those children that someone will always come back for them. Thank you for teaching me what promises matter, what is worth protecting." Syrax's eyes glowed bright. "Humans are strange creatures. You are fragile, short-lived, vulnerable. Yet you protect others with fierce determination. You see suffering and choose to help, even when helping is difficult. Someone has to, yes, and I am grateful it was you." The dragon boarded the ship. Kenna watched from the observation deck as it departed, accelerating toward the scorched reaches. The vessel's signature faded into faster-than-light travel, gone but not forgotten. Commander Price joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. He offered her one without comment. "Think that's the last time we see it?" he asked. "No. Syrax will visit again, and again, until visiting becomes normal. Until a dragon on a refugee station is just another part of life in the Coalition." "You're an optimist." "I am realistic. Change happens slowly, but happens. 6 months ago, we were hiding families in maintenance tunnels. Today, they're building lives here. That's progress." "Fair point." Price sipped his tea. "Speaking of progress, I've been authorized to expand medical staff. Could use a chief of refugee medicine, someone experienced with unusual situations. Are you offering me a promotion?" "I'm offering you more work, a fancier title, and the exact same pay. But you get an office with a window." Kenna laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in weeks. "Sold. When do I start?" "You already did." They stood together, watching the endless flow of ships. Somewhere out there, refugees traveled toward safety. Somewhere, a dragon flew through stellar heat toward home. Somewhere, families slept peacefully for the first time in months. The universe was vast, full of disaster and difficulty, but also full of people trying to help, full of unexpected friendships and impossible compassion, full of small ones and large ones, all learning what it meant to protect each other. That was enough. That was everything. Kenna finished her tea and returned to work. There were always more patients, more families, more people needing help. She'd face them all the same way she faced everything else. One person at a time, one decision at a time, one act of compassion at a time, until the universe changed. Or she did. Or both.